And so it says, having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Now, in order for Jesus to spit on the ground and make mud with the saliva, what does he need to do? He spit on the ground, yes, but what else? Yeah, you're not gonna make mud unless you get down. So here's Jesus. He's down on one knee maybe, and his hands are where? On the ground, in the dirt. Do you remember anything about last week? The woman caught in adultery. You remember? Jesus had to stoop down. He had to put his hands in the dirt. Again, now that's probably not just coincidence that 2 times in 2 chapters John talks about Jesus, the only times I know of him talking about stooping down and put his hands in the dirt. But one thing it reminds me of is the fact that Jesus humbled himself and took on humanity to be there with us. I wonder what it felt like to be the blind man and for Jesus to come down at his level and then to put his hands in the dirt. Putting your hands in the dirt, does anybody remember anything like that in the book of Genesis? God, yeah, he put his hands in the dirt, didn't he? He formed man out of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Jesus put his hands in the dirt. I'm not sure why he had to use spit. There's probably a reason for it. But he made this clay, and he rubbed it on his eyes. And he told them to go to Siloam, and which means sent. And so Jesus did what with the blind man? He sent the blind man to a place that means sent. Okay? And so a lot of times in life, as we start thinking about our lives and why God does stuff, we have to trust him, right? I'm just trying to put who was the blind man? That was you. That's right. What would it be like to never have seen, and now Jesus tells you to go over to some pool somewhere and wash off your eyes, and you just know he's this man named Jesus. That's all that he knew about him. What would that be like? Yeah, he may know his way around. I don't know if he had to feel his way there. It doesn't say anybody went with him. He washes his eyes, and then it goes on to say, so he went and washed and came back seeing. The neighbors who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Is it he?" And some were saying, "No, but he's like him." Why would this guy's there every day? They know he's there every day. Why are they having trouble recognizing him, you think? He can see. Yeah. Do you think he looked any different? He moved different. He looked different. And what about if you looked in his face? What if you looked in his eyes? Would you see anything different, do you think? What would it have been like before? Yeah, but before, what would it have been like? Milky eyes. It could be just despondent eyes. It could be, what did you say? Dead eyes? Just empty. Have you ever seen anybody look like they're just... Now, what did they look like? Alive. They're taking in everything. Can you imagine never seeing and now you see a tree? Oh, that's what those things look like. You see people. Whoa, we look like that? What? And what are these little things? Animals. Everything, your whole life you've never seen, all of a sudden things come to life. And your eyes are on fire. They're lit up. The eyes are demonstrating your soul. What's going on? And he said, "I am the man." And then the neighbor said, "Then how were your eyes open?" And so, do we have anyone, Mark, you got it here? Do you got a stopwatch? Are you ready for it? Okay, when I start reading, not now, but when I start reading, you start it. And when I stop, you stop it. Okay, are you ready? Are you ready? You are, okay. "The man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed and received my sight." How long? 10 seconds. What did he do in 10 seconds? He answered. He gave a testimony. He said, this is what God did. I don't know why I was like that. I don't know why. I'm guessing this guy, as I look at his attitude a little bit later, that he's a teenager. I'm guessing it because his parents are saying, well, he's old enough. He's of age. And they also his, they didn't live that long. His parents were still around. And so I'm guessing he is, but maybe he's a little older. From his attitude, though, I'm guessing a little bit. But he said, I am the man. And they said, then how were your eyes open? And he gives this 10-second testimony. Let me ask you this right now. If you had 10 or 15 seconds, could you tell somebody next to you something that God has done for you? Could you do it? How many people think they could do it? 10 or 15 seconds, tell somebody, this is what it was like, then God did this. I'm going to give you a chance if you think you can do it to the person next to you. Are you ready? Set, go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, and that, did anybody actually get a testimony out in that amount of time? I'm not going to have you say it. Did you? Few people did. Okay. You think if you worked on it, you could have a testimony you could get together? Even if you took 10 minutes or 30 minutes, you think you could have a testimony of something God's done? Well, what we're learning here is we don't always know why things happen in our life, right? But if we accept that God has a plan and we turn to Him, He'll give us a testimony. He'll give us something to say. He helps us understand that He's doing something even when we don't understand what or why He's doing it. And one thing He wants us to do is to share our testimony with other people. That's the way we become part of the light. We become part of the work of God. And so it says that the Pharisees wanted to find out about this guy. They brought this guy to the Pharisees, and here's what he said to them. He said, he put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. He put mud, there again. That one was a shorter one. Wasn't that about a 7-second testimony? And so the Pharisees said, this man's not from God. He doesn't keep the Sabbath. But others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such signs? And there was a division among them. And they go back to the blind man and say, what do you say? And he says, I don't know, he's a prophet. And so the parents are brought in, and they say, we don't know. We know he's our son, but we don't know how this happened. We don't know how this happened. Ask him. He's of age. Let me ask you, what do you think of those parents? Think they were looking out for their own skin, right? Yeah. They probably didn't understand it either. What would you think if your son had been blind his whole life and now he could see?
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. It's amazing. Yeah. Something happened, and our son, whose future was sitting on the road begging, back then, they didn't have all the kind of progress we have. His future was begging, and they had said, well, he said he's on his own now, right? Can see. Isn't that something amazing? Isn't that something you would want to tell people about? Isn't that something you'd want to find out about yourself? How can this happen? How could this have happened? And so they asked him, they told him, give glory to God. We know that this man's a sinner. And here's what he says. Whether he's a sinner, I don't know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. And the Pharisee, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And here's the part where it makes me think he's a teenager. I told you already, and you wouldn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciple? The Pharisee said, you're his disciple, but we're the disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken through Moses, but as for this man, we don't know where he comes from. Here he goes again, Fred. Why? Is this thing amazing to you? You don't know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but anyone who is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Nevertheless, since the world began, has never been that anyone who opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They say, you were born in utter sin, and you would teach us, and they cast him out. Here's the next thing. When you don't understand why in life, why things are happening, you've got to believe God's at work. God is doing something, and we don't always understand it. But God is doing something, and we can come to him, and we can ask him to help us, to guide us, to give us what we need. And Jesus shows up. And Jesus said, do you believe in the Son of Man? And he said, who is he, sir, that I might believe? You've seen him, and he's speaking to you. And the blind man said, Lord, the formerly blind man said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. When confronted with life and things that you don't understand, maybe things that you're even to blame for, but they're all going wrong. And when you've been put in situations that you don't know what to do, you've got to look to the bigger picture that God is in control. Accept his grace. Accept that he's working in your life. All things work together for good, even when we don't understand it. And then recognize who he is and ask him, now, what can I do for you? I know you're looking out for me. What can I do for you? Jesus said, for judgment I've come into the world, that those who do not see, and those who see may become blind. So the Pharisees near him heard him and said, are we blind? He said, if you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say we see, God, your guilt remains. Jesus is saying this thing. When you don't understand, when you don't know why, turn to God. He is the only answer. Believe that he has your best interest in mind, and trust him, because there is no other answer. There is no other way. All we can do is say, thank you, God, for your grace. What can I do for you? I want to be a part of your work. Just think, Jesus was just walking by, right? His disciples saw a man born blind. And all of a sudden, that person that was really a marginal person in society, and just a kind of a side story, becomes the center of attention for God, for Jesus. Just think, if Jesus hadn't stopped there, we'd be missing all of John 9, but we'd also be missing John 10. John 10, Jesus goes on to explain about himself, and it's just a further conversation that he went on to explain when talking about this blind man. And he talks about how, just think if we never had this. Jesus said, I know my sheep by name, and they follow. Wouldn't it be a bummer to miss that? Jesus said that no man is able to take you out of my hand. No man is able to snatch you out of my Father's hand. My Father is greater than all. No one is able to take you out of my Father's hand. He says that in that chapter. He says that we're secure in him. If Jesus hadn't stopped, I don't know, we might be going straight from John 8 to John 11 and would miss out on the fact that God has us in his hand. Jesus has us in his hand. He knows us by name. We know his voice and we follow him, and the Father has us in his hand. It's a double hand grip that explains to us that God is holding on to us even when we can't take care of ourselves. That he is giving us light, he's giving us life. We would not have that. We would not have those chapters to find that out if Jesus hadn't stopped in the middle of something that was hard to understand and reached out to this guy. Sometimes it is difficult to understand. I want to just close with a little note that my sister sent me. I don't think I have it up here, but she sent me a note a week or so ago. My mom is almost 95, and she's got pretty advanced Alzheimer's. So when you're talking to her, you She might not know who I am, or she knows who I am, but then in 30 seconds she might have to find out that I'm the same person. She doesn't remember a lot of things. And so she's confused a lot of times. She has dreams and she thinks they're real, and she has real things and she doesn't think they're real, and she's in a memory care center. And she asks my sister quite a bit, and she asks me occasionally, why am I still here? Why am I still here? And my sister explains to her, I explain to her, well, there must be something that God has for you to do still. It's hard to believe. 95 years, what would God have for her? She's living in a memory care center. There's another lady that lives there, a really sweet lady. Her name's Beverly. And my mom told my sister last week that Beverly didn't know if she was going to heaven. And so my mom explained to her how she could know, and she put her trust in Jesus. That was 2 weeks ago. Beverly died last week. And my mom really isn't sure it really happened because she has trouble remembering things. But we think it did. We think that probably that's the reason that God kept her there, because I know I never would have went to that memory center and found Beverly and explained how she could have Jesus. So here's the thing. We don't understand a lot of times. I can't explain this blind man situation, but we know that Jesus cares, that he has a plan, and that he can use us, and we should work while it's still day. Let's stand for